Three, two, one. What's up, guys, and welcome to the Practice Perfect Journal podcast. Here it is my job to go out and find, research, and test all the best information out there when it comes to high performance and skill acquisition. So no matter if you're just starting out or looking to take your skills to the next level, there will definitely be something here to help you progress faster and farther than you ever have before. So we are 2 days away from Christmas. It is Christmas Eve, the 23rd, and yeah, the year is quickly winding down. The decade is winding down. That's so crazy to think of. It's got me feeling a little nostalgic and thinking of all the lives that I've lived over the last decade, from graduating high school in 2010 to leaving martial arts, or at least to cease the practice that I was doing. Forever martial artist at heart, but doing that, transitioning from that into a competitive paintball player, something that I'd always wanted to do since I was little, and going to college and graduating college and starting my career path, and all the things and all the ups and downs additionally with their relationships we've had, failed relationships that I've had, and just realizing that a lot happens in a decade. And from starting my journey as a musician as well, officially starting my journey as a musician as well. And there's been a lot of crazy times going on. And yeah, I challenge you to go ahead and think back on the last decade as well, because you'll quickly find out as well that, man, there's been a lot of things that have happened. And it's kind of cool to think, it's like, okay, well, now we had that whole decade of things happen, so now what do I want to have happen in the next decade? So definitely going to deep dive myself into what I want to accomplish and how I'm going to accomplish it, and really set forth on making some big things happen in the next decade. But that's neither here nor there. We'll talk about that later. What I wanted to talk about today, actually, was something that I know I've touched on before, but I think that it's incredibly important, and it will really help open up a lot of people's lives if they do this thing and they kind of start implementing and thinking this way. So let's go back a couple years ago. I had moved out. I was living in a nice little kind of townhouse kind of thing with one of my friends, and so the last place I lived. And I decided I was going to start pursuing this music thing more fully. And again, this was when I realized that my practice wasn't, or my talent, my skill threshold wasn't the problem. I was the problem. And the reason why I plateaued so hard was because I wasn't actually practicing, and I wasn't really taking anything seriously. So I remember listening to a podcast, and something they said struck me. I can't remember exactly which podcast it was, but I remember something they said struck me, and I promptly went and I sat down and kind of thought about my life a little while, and from that one thing that sparked, I was able to work a full-time job, drive. My commute then was 30 to 40 minutes, so work a full-time job, commute an hour-ish a day, slightly over an hour a day, and still be able to come home and practice for 4 hours a day. Like I think I was averaging 2 to 4, somewhere in that range. But I was crushing it. And I really started noticing a lot of growth happen during this phase, and I reignited a lot of the previously lost enjoyment that I had with playing music and playing drums and actually just sitting down and grinding at the kit. And let me go ahead and paint a picture back a little bit. Let's go back a little bit farther, before my last living situation. So I have pretty much been like an avid gamer my whole life. I played RuneScape back in the day. That was like probably my first. I had Nintendo 64, and then we went into RuneScape, and then got the Xbox, played all the Halos, you know. So gaming was always a really big part of my life. Like, it was like gaming and martial arts, basically. And I ran track and field for 1 year and did mediocre at best. But I'd always played like way more video games than I should have. But it was a kind of a community thing going on, and it kind of helped feed my competitive nature. So it's like I primarily chose to play stuff that was more competitive, so like Call of Duties, and then I got into League of Legends, and so forth and so on. And that kind of spiraled from there. And I realized as my life went on, I was like, man, or at least more recently, excuse me, burping, but it was during this time when I moved into this new apartment, and I realized, like, what I'm doing right now is not working. It's not helping me get to where I want to be. And what I did, I went and I sat down, and in this podcast, I'm pretty sure it was a Tim Ferriss podcast, by the way. If you haven't checked that out, dude, it's insane. He's insane. You gotta listen to him. There's something in there for everyone. But I digress. So one of the things they talked about was creating a not to-do list. So basically, taking out a sheet of paper and writing out all the things that you're currently doing that you probably should stop doing, and or like things that you could just stop doing in general that would help give you additional time. And I remember on mine, like, because at that time in my life, again, I was like playing an insane amount of video games, probably playing like 4 or 5 hours a day. And if you think, oh, Ben, that's insane, that's so much video games. Well, how much TV do you watch? Okay, like, let's go ahead and look at our own selves first. Like, how much TV do you watch? Do you come home and immediately sit down and watch TV? Do you watch YouTube? Do you scroll through social media for hours at a time? Do you bounce from cat video to cat video? There's an insane amount of time that we're leaving on the table, and I know that we need a little bit of time to like kind of relax and recuperate. But I know most of us, like myself included, like looking back at my life, I was spending an absurd amount playing video games, watching these like just unnecessary amounts of YouTube videos. And I remember I started writing all these things down. I can't remember. I threw away the sheet for like a long time ago. This was 3 years ago. Or 2 years, 2.5 years ago. I remember writing all this down and realizing, I was like, dude, and I kind of guessed the hours I was spending. And I was like, dude, I'm leaving an insane amount of time on the table. And I decided, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna stop playing video games altogether. I'm gonna limit my time on YouTube, just watching nonsense videos, right? And we're gonna see what happens. We're gonna see how the life opens up. Caveat, thankfully, at that apartment, we had really good internet, but for some reason it would always kind of glitch out when I was playing games, so it's very hard to play competitively when you're randomly disconnecting from the game. So thankfully I had that work in my favor as well. So that made it really easy to stop playing, because when you're just constantly raging every single time you're in a game, it quickly becomes not fun. And from doing this immediately, like 3 hours opened up, 3-4 hours opened up instantly. And instead of, and this is the problem, and this is where a lot of people start failing, and this is, I think, where a lot of people start struggling, is they open up all this free time they get rid of like one bad habit, right? And then all of a sudden, all this gap that they have, they fill it with just another bad habit. So like for example, for me, like playing video games, I give up playing video games. If I started watching just more YouTube, I started watching more TV, like just junk television, like all of a sudden, like that time I freed up is irrelevant. It's just being wasted again. Like it's effectively like the same idea as just eating a bunch of cookies, right? Like It's like you're hungry now and those cookies look really good and I really want to eat those. So you feed your face and it's good in the moment, but then you kind of feel gross afterwards and you slowly start getting fatter. And it doesn't, like, eating a couple cookies immediately doesn't really have those instant effects. But if you keep doing it over and over and over, eventually you're going to become fat, potentially die of heart disease. Utilizing and wasting your time is no different, right? So it's like, okay, like, let's say like you were eating 3, 4, 5 cookies a day and you stopped doing that. But instead of eating cookies, now you're eating brownies. Or you give up brownies and now you're eating insert other junk food, right? It's kind of the same thing. So what you want to do is when you free up this time is you need to immediately utilize it for the new thing that you're trying to do. So for in my case, it was to play and practice more. And I did that for a while, and with my schedule, I think that I was practicing 2 to 2.5-ish hours in the afternoon, but I wanted to practice more, I wanted to play more. So what I started doing was I started going to bed like really early. I started going to bed at like 10, right? And for a person who was obscenely more of a night owl kind of person, just because I played video games like for so long my entire life, consistently playing until like 3, 4, 5, 6 a.m., right? The sun goes down, the sun comes up, and I sleep until 4 p.m. the next day, right? Lived that kind of life for a while. It was fun. Definitely kind of wasteful, but I enjoyed it, so whatever. Took that time. I started going to bed early, so like 10, and I would wake up at 5:30. Well, I didn't have to leave for work until 8:30, so I had this block of like 2-3 hours in the morning. So what did I do? I would go and I would get my coffee. I'd walk downstairs and get my coffee, come upstairs, and I would very quietly, I would drink, I think I would meditate, I would journal a little bit. So I usually spend about 30 minutes on a morning routine, but then I would still have an hour to an hour and a half to do whatever before I got ready to leave for work. So I took that time and then I plugged more practice into it. So I was like, what do I want to practice in the morning? Something I can do really quietly. So not going to be able to practice double bass in the morning. I will get evicted, or I'll get kicked out. My roommate will murder me in my sleep. Actually, he was usually gone by then. He worked way early. But anyway. But I found this extra time. Whereas instead of like back in the day, if I would have had that extra hour and a half, I would just would have watched YouTube or would have played video games or would have done something else that doesn't help move the needle. So that's what I want you to try and figure out is like, is there time during the day that I'm just kind of wasting 2, 3, 4 hours? And how can I limit that and plug in something better? Even if you just trade for 30 minutes, like if that sounds too big that you're just like, I can't just go straight into the 4 hours, that's a long time. Yes, it is. So make sure to make it sustainable. So to do this, you want to you could either try and go cold turkey, and if you're focusing on one thing, you can try and do it that way. Don't try and change multiple things all at once. It becomes too hard and you burn out. But even if you're just watching for 30 minutes less, like you're watching one less episode of The Simpsons or whatever it is you're watching, limit that and plug in your practice time first. Do that first. Don't try and cut it off the end because it's much harder to stop than it is to start, right? So plug in whatever you want to do beginning before you have all your free time and then get after it. So that's my recommendations today. So again, going into the new year. So try and do this before you go into the new year, before we go into the new decade, because if you can start making better habits now, they're going to get easier and easier as you go through the new year, the new decade. So start asking yourself those kind of questions, like where am I just kind of wasting time that I could be utilizing to help further my future in a more beneficial way. I'm not saying you have to give up all your leisure time, but if you want to do big things, got to make sacrifices, right? So it comes down to what are you going to give up and how are you going to replace it with something that moves the needle forward. And even if you don't know, like just start practicing more, start trying to figure out how you can use this this additional time in a more beneficial way. And you'll figure out the answers relatively quickly. Remember, we have this magical thing called Google, and we have this magical thing called YouTube. So if you don't know where to go, like practice-wise, just Google some practice stuff to try and further yourself in whatever facet that you're working on. So again, this has been with Practice Perfect Journal. I am signing out. I actually do have I got a lesson coming up in 30 minutes, so gotta get ready for that. Stretch out my tight ass muscles, and I will see you all later. Peace out.